So, have you ever been overwhelmed when it comes to creating health? There is so much information out there, which is amazing. We have more information at our fingertips than we ever have. And that's the downside also, because you can hop on social media right now and one person will say, "Oh my gosh, intermittent fasting, it will save your hormones." And another person will say, "Intermittent fasting wrecked my health." And both people have sound arguments and good data and probably can find a study to back them up. So let's talk about ways that we can build that muscle so that we're not walking into overwhelm. My name's Kristen Bowen. I've been working with clients for over 20 years, helping women focus on the things that will get them hiking the mountain, riding their bike, jumping on their trampoline with grandkids, or whatever it is that they want to do because they feel so good. And it is so important for you to remember that I am not a doctor. I am not prescribing. I am not diagnosing. I'm just sharing with you for educational purposes. So today, let's share. And I would love to know your thoughts on this and what works for you. So, number one, I think it's so important for you to recognize and understand if you've ever been overwhelmed. Overwhelm is not an emotion. It's not an emotion. Overwhelm is a lack of action, meaning that you have learned so many things and now you're overwhelmed on which one to take action on. So overwhelm is not an emotion. And when you get overwhelmed, if you can say to yourself, overwhelm is not an emotion, this is not an emotion, get comfortable to sit with the overwhelm. Get comfortable sitting with that overwhelm, because as you do, you can then start asking yourself questions. So let's go over some of the questions, and I've got them on a Google Doc on my other screen. So I'm going to look over here for a second and to make sure I cover all of the things that came up. This was supposed to be a blog post and it'll never get written. I'm just going to talk it out with you today. Because when we're overwhelmed, guess what happens? We are moving our magnesium out through our body. So now I have a question for you. How overwhelmed were you yesterday? You moved the magnesium that you had outside of your body. And so, do you see how you can control your own minerals by recognizing overwhelm is not an emotion and just being okay sitting with it? Just like, oh, yeah, here's the overwhelm. We live in a society that there's so much information and I'm getting ready to take action. Because typically when overwhelm kicks in, we tend to beat ourselves up and go to this dark place that doesn't have as much light or connection or help. So training ourselves to stay comfortable with the overwhelm and just laugh about it. And I'll say out loud, oh my gosh, that interweb, that web Google, like gave me so much information. I'm overwhelmed right now. So I am taking a minute to ask myself questions and just be okay with it. No shame, no issues, no guilt, no anything. Just be okay with the overwhelm. Because after you've soaked in that magnesium from living the good life naturally, because remember, our goal is cell saturation. And we do that by soaking in magnesium from living the good life naturally. And we can determine how often we have to soak to some extent. And overwhelm is one of those that, boom, takes you away. And when you walk away from magnesium cell saturation, you're walking away from giving your body the resources to utilize stored and active vitamin D. And that's the gateway to your health. Magnesium, stored active vitamin D. That is the first gate you walk through. So that's why our foundational first step is soaking in magnesium from living the good life naturally and achieving cell saturation. That's the first step to balancing hormones, improving thyroid function, improving bone density, improving gut health, improving mitochondrial health, improving ATP energy, improving anxiety and depression. Now, I did not say that magnesium heals everything. That would be inappropriate. I did not say that. It is the first gate that we course correct while you and I build that strong foundation together. So I'm looking over at my Google, my Google again. One of the questions, and you may not need to ask this, I do. Whom am I trying to please? Whom am I trying to please? And the answer might be no one. The answer might be my mom, or my dad, or my girlfriend, my husband, my kids, I don't know who that will be for you. But ask yourself, whom am I trying to please? And then just be still for a minute. Just be still. Or maybe work on a project. Just sit with it. And sometimes we push away our health because our life is so busy. It's so incredibly busy that we can't even hear that feedback of who it is we're trying to please. And a lot of times, even if you don't consider yourself I'm a recovering people pleaser. Even if you don't consider yourself a people pleaser, you might find that there are some times that is playing a role. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we're thinking strategically. Now, listen when you talk. When you talk, listen to yourself. Do you tend to say, I think, or do you tend to say, I feel? I tend to say, I feel. What's yours? Do you say think or feel? And we need to make sure that we're in our thinking brain, not our heart. So we need to be up here in our thinking brain so that we can make linear, strategic decisions. And then the next question you can ask yourself is, if I were buying into perfectionism, how would it look? What would it look like in this situation? What would perfectionism look like? Like, what has to be perfect before I can get started? And I cannot tell you, and if you've ever thought, I will start eating healthy on Monday, I will start eating healthy after my company leaves. I will start eating healthy when the kids are back in school. I will start eating healthy in January after the holidays. If you have ever had a thought like that, ooh, it could be perfectionism. I'm not calling it for you. I'm not calling that. You need to call that for yourself, but it could be perfectionism. And today, I'm issuing you a challenge. I want you to do something that brings great joy, that you just think, oh, this is what life is supposed to be like. And when I'm doing things like this for my grandkids, that's the thought that runs through my head. Oh, this is what life is supposed to be like. Because when we have thoughts like that, it helps us hold on to our magnesium so that our burn rate is lower. And getting to cell saturation is a two-step process. It's about soaking in magnesium from living the good life naturally. It's also about changing your thoughts, your mindset, your actions, so that you're decreasing and going from a high magnesium burn rate to a low magnesium burn rate. Because if you do those two things, that means internally you're going from being calcium dominant to magnesium rich. And when you do that, it's easier to create help. Ah, I'll see you next week.
Living the good